The year was 2147. Earth was no longer a free world. For decades, humanity had fought against the Zolari Dominion, a brutal alien empire that had conquered countless planets across the galaxy. The Zolari were towering, reptilian creatures with scaly, obsidian-black skin, glowing amber eyes, and razor-sharp claws. They were known for their ruthless tactics, their advanced technology, and their complete lack of mercy. When Earth resisted their rule, the Zolari responded with overwhelming force. Their warships rained fire from the skies, reducing entire cities to rubble. Their ground troops enslaved survivors, forcing them to work in labor camps. Any attempt at rebellion was crushed instantly. Within 5 years, Earth surrendered. The once great nations of humanity were reduced to subjugated colonies, ruled by Zolari overlords who treated humans as an inferior race. They imposed brutal laws, forbade human governments, and executed anyone who spoke of rebellion. But not all humans had given up. One man still fought for peace, Ambassador Darius Voss. The last hope for diplomacy. Darius Voss was a respected diplomat, known for his wisdom and ability to negotiate. He had spent years trying to convince the Zolari to treat humans with dignity, to allow them basic freedoms, to stop the suffering. Many humans saw him as a traitor for working with the aliens, but Darius believed that diplomacy was the only path to survival. If war had failed, then words had to succeed. And for a while, it seemed like he was making progress. The Zolari High Chancellor, a towering figure named Zyfarnul, agreed to meet with Darius on Zealer Prime, the Zolari homeworld. It was an unprecedented moment, a human being invited to the heart of the Dominion. Darius believed this was his chance. If he could convince the Zolari leadership to show mercy, to grant humans better conditions, then maybe Earth could begin to heal. He boarded the diplomatic shuttle, unaware that he was walking into a trap. The betrayal. The Great Council Hall of Zealer Prime was an architectural marvel. A vast chamber, carved from an obsidian-black mineral found only on their homeworld, with massive pillars stretching toward the ceiling like the claws of some ancient beast. The air smelled of burning incense, a sacred Zolari tradition. Darius stood before the High Council, his face calm, his heart steady. He had faced warlords before. He had faced men and monsters who wanted him dead. But nothing had prepared him for the sheer presence of General Cathar. Cathar was one of the Zolari's most feared commanders, a warlord who had led the invasion of Earth himself. He was massive, even by Zolari standards, standing nearly 10 feet tall, his obsidian-black armor blending with his scaled skin. His long, coiled tail flicked behind him as he studied Darius with a cruel grin. Darius spoke with calm authority. "I come not as an enemy," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "I come as a representative of my people, seeking peace. The war is over. Humanity does not resist your rule. All we ask is for dignity, for a future." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Cathar laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound that sent chills down Darius's spine. "You humans never learn," Cathar sneered. "You think peace is something you can negotiate?" Darius's stomach turned. Something was wrong. The High Chancellor remained silent, his glowing golden eyes unreadable. The other Zolari Council members watched with cold detachment, as if this had already been decided. Darius took a slow breath. "I believe reason can guide us, General. War benefits neither of us. If we work together." Cathar moved like lightning. Before Darius could react, the warlord's massive clawed hand shot forward, grabbing him by the throat and lifting him off the ground. "You think we need your cooperation?" Cathar snarled, his grip tightening. Darius struggled, his hands clawing at the alien's iron grip. "You think we care about your people?" Darius's vision blurred. He could barely breathe. The High Chancellor finally spoke. His voice was cold and final. "The humans must remember their place." Cathar's other hand moved, and with a single swift motion, he drove a plasma spear straight through Darius's chest. The human diplomat gasped as searing pain shot through his body. He could feel the energy burning his insides, his body convulsing as blood pooled at his feet. His mind screamed in protest, but his body was already failing him. As his vision darkened, He had only one thought.
Brian.
And then, Darius Voss was dead. The Zolari's greatest mistake. Cathar tossed the lifeless body onto the cold floor. His black scales glistened with the diplomat's blood as he turned to the council. "The humans are weak," he spat. "They always talk of peace, but they don't understand power." The High Chancellor nodded approvingly. "Send the message to Earth. Let them know their ambassador is no more." The order was carried out swiftly. Within hours, the news was broadcast across every human colony. The message was simple. Ambassador Darius Voss is dead. Earth belongs to the Dominion. Resistance is futile. The Zolari believed they had crushed the last hope of diplomacy. What they didn't know was that Darius had a son. A son who had no interest in peace. A son who had spent his life training in secret, preparing for the day humanity would rise again. A son who would bring them vengeance. The shadow of war rises. On a hidden human resistance base, Orion Voss watched the broadcast in silence. The Zolari's voice was cold, emotionless. His father's face appeared on the screen, first alive, then lying dead on the floor. The spear still impaled through his chest. Something inside Orion snapped. 4 years, he had fought alongside the resistance, learning their ways, training in combat, studying the Zolari's weaknesses. But his father had believed in peace, so Orion had held himself back. No more. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His blue eyes burned with an intensity no one had ever seen before. Behind him, the resistance leaders watched in silence, waiting for his reaction. Finally, Orion spoke. His voice was calm. Too calm. "We burn Zealer Prime to the ground." The resistance erupted in cheers. The Zolari had made a mistake. They killed a diplomat. They had created an avenger. And now, the war for Earth's freedom would begin. The message of Darius Voss's execution spread across Earth's colonies like wildfire. Some humans fell into despair, believing any hope of freedom had died with him. Others raged in secret, their hatred for the Zolari intensifying. But in a hidden underground bunker on Europa, Jupiter's frozen moon and the headquarters of Earth's last resistance fighters, one man did not mourn. He plotted. The making of a warrior. Orion Voss had never been like his father. Where Darius believed in negotiation, Orion believed in action. He had grown up in the shadows of war, watching Earth's downfall as a child. He had seen his friends dragged away to labor camps, never to return. He had seen his mother executed by the Zolari for daring to speak against their rule. And now, they had taken his father, too. His mind was a storm of emotions. Grief, anger, vengeance, but he channeled them into a singular purpose. Cathar had to die. Not just for revenge, but to send a message to the Zolari: humanity would not be broken. Orion had trained for years under the best warriors Earth had left: rogue soldiers, exiled assassins, and hackers who could crack the Zolari's security systems. He had mastered guerrilla tactics, close-quarters combat, and the use of stolen alien weapons. Now, it was time to put that training to the test. A plan for war. Inside the Resistance Command Center, Orion stood before a massive holographic map of Zealer Prime. His most trusted fighters surrounded him: Elias Rourke, a battle-hardened strategist; Sienna Graves, an infiltration expert; and Draven Holt, a weapons specialist. Orion pointed to a red-marked location on the map: Cathar's personal fortress. "This is our target," he said. His voice was ice-cold, devoid of hesitation. "We get in, we kill him, we get out." Elias frowned. "Zealer Prime is the most heavily fortified planet in the Dominion. We can't just walk in." Orion smirked. "We won't walk. We'll infiltrate." Sienna leaned forward. "How?" Orion pulled up another section of the map. "The Zolari use forced labor from conquered species. We'll disguise ourselves as off-world workers being transported to Zealer Prime. Once inside, we slip out, blend into the city, and make our way to Cathar's fortress." Draven whistled. "That's insane." Orion's gaze darkened. "It's also our best shot." After a moment of silence, Elias nodded. "Then we do it." Orion turned to his team. This isn't just about my father. This is about sending a message. If we kill Cathar, the Zalari will know that we are not prey. The room filled with murmurs of agreement. The time for waiting was over. The time for war had begun. Infiltrating Zealer Prime. The stolen Zalari cargo ship shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of Zealer Prime. The disguise had worked. Zalari patrols scanned the ship and cleared it for landing, believing it carried new workers for the city's labor camps. Orion and his team sat in the darkened cargo hold, dressed in tattered slave uniforms, hiding weapons beneath their rags. The tension in the air was thick. Sienna whispered, "Once we're out, we have to move fast. Patrols will be everywhere." Orion nodded, gripping the handle of a stolen Zalari plasma dagger. The ship landed with a metallic thud. The doors hissed open, revealing a bleak and monstrous landscape. Zurich City, the capital of Zealer Prime, was a towering nightmare of blackened steel and glowing red lights. The sky was choked with smog, and massive alien drones floated overhead, scanning the crowds. In the streets below, thousands of enslaved beings, humans, Tverans, Score, moved like ghosts, their faces hollow, their bodies weak from starvation. Orion's rage burned at the sight. The Zalari herded the new arrivals toward the city's processing center. Now was their chance. As they reached a blind spot in the patrol routes, Orion gave the signal. In an instant, his team sprang into action. Sienna and Elias silently slit the throats of two nearby Zalari guards, dragging their bodies into the shadows. Orion and Draven disabled the surveillance drones, hijacking their signals to loop false footage. Within moments, they had vanished into the maze-like alleys of Zurich City. Now, the hunt for Cathar began. Tracking the warlord. Orion's team spent 2 days moving through the city, gathering intelligence. They bribed black market information brokers, hacked into security feeds, and eliminated anyone who stood in their way. What they discovered was worse than they imagined. Cathar's fortress wasn't just his personal residence, it was an execution center. Thousands of humans and other enslaved species were dragged inside, never to be seen again. Orion's fury deepened. "This isn't just a mission anymore," he told his team. "We have to free these people." Elias nodded. "Then we hit them hard. Take out Cathar, and turn this prison into a battlefield." They had their plan. Now, it was time to strike. The silent attack. At midnight, Orion and his team scaled the fortress's black stone walls, avoiding the searchlights and drone patrols. They moved like shadows, slipping through gaps in security. Once inside, they split up. Sienna and Elias would disable the fortress's communications, while Orion and Draven would hunt Cathar. Room by room, they took out Zalari guards with brutal efficiency. Orion moved with a predator's grace, his plasma dagger slicing through armored flesh with silent precision. The fortress was a maze of horrors, cages filled with starving prisoners, torture chambers where Zalari experimented on humans. Orion forced himself to push forward, knowing that Cathar awaited him at the end of this path. Then, they reached the warlord's throne room. Face to face with the monster. Cathar sat on a throne of skulls, drinking a thick, black liquid from a metal goblet. He turned as the doors slammed open, his golden eyes locking onto Orion. "So," he sneered, "the diplomat's whelp has come to die." Orion stepped forward, blade in hand. His voice was steady, but his blood boiled. "No," he said coldly. "I've come to kill you." Cathar laughed, rising to his full, monstrous height. "You think you can defeat me, human?" He unsheathed a massive plasma sword, its energy crackling in the air. "Then come and die like your father." Orion lunged. Their blades clashed with a violent explosion of energy. Cathar was stronger, but Orion was faster. He ducked and weaved, striking where the Zalari was weakest. His plasma dagger burned through Cathar's armor, drawing black blood. The warlord roared in pain, swinging his massive sword. Orion barely dodged, the blade slicing a gash across his shoulder. Ignoring the pain, Orion moved in for the kill. With a final, deadly strike, he drove his dagger straight into Cathar's throat. The warlord gurgled, eyes wide in shock, before collapsing to the floor. Orion leaned in, whispering, "This is for my father." Cathar was dead. And now, the real war would begin. Cathar's lifeless body hit the ground with a heavy thud, his black blood pooling beneath him. The once feared warlord of the Zalari Dominion, the Butcher of Earth, the slayer of Darius Vos, was dead. But Orion Vos had no time to celebrate. A deafening alarm blared throughout the fortress. The Zalari guards had discovered the intruders. The hunt was on. The escape turns to war. Orion activated his comms link. "Sienna, Elias, status?" Sienna's voice crackled through. "We disabled their communications, but we've got company. Whole squads of Zalari guards are moving in." Elias added, "We need an exit now." Orion grabbed Cathar's plasma sword, feeling its deadly weight in his hands. "Draven, with me." We cut our way out. The fortress shook as Zalari soldiers stormed through the corridors. Orion and Draven met them head-on. Plasma fire erupted from both sides, the battle raging through the warlord's chambers. Orion moved like a ghost, slashing through enemy ranks with brutal precision. The weight of vengeance fueled him, his father's voice echoing in his mind. "Never let them break you, Orion." Draven covered his flank, launching explosives that tore through enemy squads. The fortress was becoming a battlefield, but Orion knew the real war was just beginning. The resistance strikes. Outside the fortress, Sienna and Elias had made their way to the Zalari security towers, hacking into the city's defense systems. Elias turned to Sienna. "Once we disable the shields, our fleet can hit them hard." Sienna's fingers flew across the controls. Almost there. The moment the shields dropped, a deafening boom shook the city. The resistance fleet had arrived. Stolen Zalari warships, now piloted by human rebels, descended from the sky, unleashing hellfire upon Zurich City. Explosions erupted across the skyline as the resistance stormed the capital. The people of Earth, once enslaved, rose up. Prisoners in labor camps fought back against their captors. Civilians seized weapons from fallen guards. The streets became a war zone, humanity's last stand for freedom. Orion's final stand. Orion and Draven finally broke through the last line of Zalari soldiers, emerging onto the fortress's upper terrace. Above them, the battle for Zealer Prime raged on. Zalari warships scrambled to counter the resistance attack, but they were unprepared. Orion's plan had worked. They hadn't just come to kill Cathar, they had come to start a war. Then, the sky darkened. A massive Zalari dreadnought loomed overhead. The High Chancellor Zyphar Null himself had arrived. His voice boomed across the city through a transmission. "Humans, surrender now, and we will spare what remains of your species." Orion grabbed a fallen Zalari communicator and spoke into it. "You should have spared my father." With that, he raised Cathar's stolen plasma sword and pointed to the dreadnought. The resistance fleet responded. A barrage of missiles shot through the sky, striking the Zalari flagship. The dreadnought's shields flickered. Then, in a single earth-shattering explosion, it was torn apart. The High Chancellor was dead. The Zalari panicked. Their leadership was in ruins, their capital under siege. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion was afraid. The fall of the Zalari Dominion. The battle raged for hours, but the tide had turned. Orion's strike team had done the impossible, not just by assassinating Cathar, but by igniting a revolution. One by one, the Zalari warships fled. Without their leaders, without their chain of command, their empire crumbled. Orion and his team stood atop Cathar's ruined fortress, watching as the sky filled with flames, the final death throes of the Zalari Dominion. Earth was no longer a conquered world. Earth was free. A new dawn. Days later, the surviving leaders of the human resistance gathered in what remained of the Zalari's throne room. Sienna turned to Orion. "The Dominion is falling apart. Other enslaved species are rising up. We did it." Orion looked out at the horizon, where the fires of revolution still burned. "No," he said. "We started it." Elias stepped forward. "The question is, what now?" Orion took a deep breath. His father had fought for peace. He had fought for vengeance. But now, they had a chance for something greater. He turned to his people. We rebuild. Not just Earth, but the galaxy. We forge an alliance of the free, so that no species will ever suffer under tyranny again. The room fell silent. Then, one by one, they nodded. The war was over. But a new future was just beginning. The legend of Orion Voss. The story of Orion Voss would be told for generations. The man who had avenged his father. The warrior who had toppled an empire. The leader who had brought humanity back from the brink. And as he stood among the ruins of the fallen Dominion, he knew one truth. Earth was free. And it would never bow again.